Hey guys, tonight we are diving headfirst into a story so strange and so human that it almost feels like a dream. We're traveling to a time and place where the modern world crashed into an ancient one, not just with weapons and soldiers, but with something far more potent, stuff. We're heading to the South Pacific to explore one of the most surreal, poignant, and frankly, logical responses to overwhelming technological shock I've ever come across. We're talking about the cargo cults, and you're going to be right there on the beach when the first strange bird appears in the sky. A little heads up in this story, your old gods are about to get some serious competition, and your entire understanding of the world is going to be completely rewritten. It's a mind-bending trip, for sure. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you're at it, let me know in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is. I love seeing how this little corner of the internet stretches across the globe. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The first thing you're aware of is the warmth. The thick, humid warmth that clings to your skin like a second layer. Your bare feet press into the fine, black sand of the beach, a strange mix of coarse and soft that's been ground down from volcanic rock over millennia. The air smells of salt, of damp earth from a brief morning shower, and the sweet, almost cloying scent of unseen tropical blossoms hidden in the jungle that rises like a solid green wall just a few paces behind you. This is your home. The island of Tanna, a tiny speck of land in the vast, deep blue of the Pacific Ocean. Your world is contained by the reef, the jungle, and the sky. Its rhythm is dictated by the sun and the tides. Its stories whispered under the sprawling, cathedral-like roots of the giant banyan trees. Look up. Dominating the skyline is the reason for the splacks, and the island's living, breathing heart, Mount Yasur. It's a volcano, and it's always grumbling. That low, constant rumble isn't a sound of threat to you, it's a lullaby, the heartbeat of your world. At night, it puts on a show, spitting glowing embers into the velvet sky, a familiar and divine firework display that has guided your ancestors home from the sea for generations. This volcano is a god, a landmark, and a constant, powerful presence. It's real. You can see it, hear it, feel its tremors in the soles of your feet. Your life is governed by something called KISTOM. It's a word that outsiders, a few missionaries and colonial administrators you've heard whispers of, struggle to understand. They try to translate it as custom or tradition, but that's like calling the ocean a large puddle. It's so much more. KISTOM is the way. It's the unwritten law, the spiritual blueprint, the collective wisdom of every ancestor who has ever lived and died on this island. It tells you how to plant yams, how to weave a sleeping mat, how to appease the spirits of the forest, and how to read the signs in the clouds. It is the operating system for your reality, a framework so complete and all-encompassing that you can't separate the practical from the spiritual. To this day, linguists and anthropologists still argue over a proper translation, because it's a concept woven from a reality so different from their own. Life is hard, but it's predictable. You hunt wild pigs in the highlands with a spear your father taught you to make. You fish from a narrow outrigger canoe, balancing on the waves with an instinct born of 1,000 tricks. Your wealth is measured in pigs, especially the ones with tusks that have been guided to grow into perfect circles, and in large, healthy yam harvests. Sickness is caused by angry spirits or curses. Good fortune is a gift from the ancestors. Everything has an explanation, a place within the grand, intricate web of KISTOM. You spend your evening with your family, chewing on roasted taro root and listening to the elders. They speak of spirits that live in the banyan trees and of the creation of the world. They recount tales of great warriors and of the gods who dwell on Mount Yasur. Their stories are your history, your entertainment, and your scripture, all rolled into one. As the last light fades, the volcano's glow intensifies, painting the underside of the clouds a faint, pulsing orange. The air cools slightly, and the chorus of insects and tree frogs rises from the jungle. Everything is as it should be. The world is stable, known, and whole. You lie down on your woven mat inside your hut, the familiar rumble of the earth a comforting presence, and drift into a sleep untroubled by the future, unaware that you are living in the final moments of an old world. The silence of the sky is about to be broken forever. You wake to the familiar sounds of the village stirring, the soft scrape of a wooden tool against a taro root, the low murmur of voices exchanging morning greetings, the distant, rhythmic crash of waves on the reef. The sun is already filtering through the thatched walls of your hut, casting long, dusty stripes of light across the earthen floor. It's a morning like any other. You stretch, the slight ache in your back a reminder of yesterday's work clearing a new yam patch. The air still holds that pre-dawn coolness, but you know it won't last. Today will be normal. You step outside, blinking in the strengthening light. The volcano, yes sir, is puffing contentedly, a gentle plume of smoke rising straight into the clear blue sky. A good omen. You grab a piece of leftover roasted breadfruit for a quick breakfast and start walking toward the community garden. There are weeds to pull, and the new shoots need to be checked for pests. The path is well worn, your feet knowing every dip and turn by heart. Everything is in its place, and then you hear it. It starts as a faint drone, a low hum on the very edge of your hearing. You pause, head tilted. Is it a swarm of insects? No. The sound is too steady, too mechanical. It's not the rumble of the volcano, which you feel in your bones as much as you hear with your ears. This sound is higher, more insistent. It seems to come not from the earth, but from the sky itself. Others have stopped too. A woman on her way to the spring balances a water-filled bamboo container on her shoulder, her face a mask of concentration as she scans the horizon. The children, usually a whirlwind of noise and motion, fall silent, clutching at their mother's legs. It's a buzz now, then a whine, then a deep, guttural roar that seems to fill the entire world. It's a sound of power, a sound of something vast and angry and utterly alien. Instinct takes over. You feel a primal urge to run, to hide under the thick canopy of the jungle. Some of the younger children begin to cry, their fear a tangible thing in the suddenly tense air. The elders look up, their faces etched with a deep, furrowed confusion you have never seen on them before. The living libraries of Kas Tom, but their eyes are as lost as yours. Then you see it. A dark speck against the brilliant blue, moving faster than any bird. It doesn't flap its wings. It doesn't soar on the thermal currents like a hawk. It carves a perfectly straight, determined line across the sky. As it gets closer, its shape becomes clearer, and your mind struggles to process the impossible geometry. It has long, rigid wings, a thick body, and a tail that is nothing like a bird's. It glints under the sun, a flash of dull metal that hurts your eyes. It's a monster, a demon. A spirit from a world beyond your comprehension. It passes directly overhead. The roar is deafening now, a physical pressure that makes your teeth vibrate and your stomach clench. You press your hands over your ears, but it does little to block out the overwhelming noise. It's so low you can see details. You see strange markings on its wings, a white star inside a blue circle. To you, this isn't a national insignia. It's a glyph, a symbol of immense and unknown power, like a spirit's sigil scrawled across the heavens. For a few terrifying seconds it eclipses the sun. The world is plunged into its shadow. This isn't just a creature passing by, it's an event, a violation of the natural order. A bird this large, this loud, made of metal, it shouldn't exist. Historians and anthropologists still debate, does it seen as a god or demon, a messenger, or an omen of destruction? The oral histories collected decades later are often colored by subsequent events. The truth is likely messier, a chaotic mix of terror and awe. For you, in that moment, it's simply the thing, a phenomenon so far outside your reality that you don't have a word for it, or a myth to contain it. Then as quickly as it appeared, it is gone. The roar recedes, shrinking back into a whine. A buzz and finally, silence. The sudden absence of the noise is as shocking as its presence. The familiar sounds of the island rush back in to fill the void, the waves, the wind in the palms, the frantic chirping of birds that had been silenced by the monster's passage. But the silence is different now. It's fragile. The sky, your old familiar friend, now feels vast and unpredictable. It holds secrets. You look at the faces of your fellow villagers. The fear is receding, replaced by a wide-eyed wonder and a torrent of questions. The elders gather, speaking in hushed, urgent tones. They are trying to fit this impossible event into the framework of K.S. Storm. Was it a spirit from the volcano? A warning from the ancestors? A new god declaring its arrival? They have no answers. For the first time in living memory, K.S. Storm is silent. The world, which just this morning felt so solid and known, now has a crack running right through the middle of it. You keep staring at the empty blue sky, half expecting the metal creature to return, and you feel a strange new emotion stirring in your gut, a cocktail of dread and a thrilling, terrifying curiosity. Your world has just become infinitely larger. The memory of the sky monster hangs over the village for days, a lingering ghost in conversations and a new shadow in your dreams. Life has to go on, of course. The yams won't plant themselves and the fish won't jump into your canoe. You try to return to the familiar rhythms of K.S. Dom, but there's a new tension in the air, a constant, shared glance towards the heavens. The elders debate, but for once, their words lack their usual certainty. This new phenomenon doesn't fit the old stories. Then, a few weeks later, something else happens. A message arrives, carried by a runner from a village on the coast. He speaks of an event far stranger than the metal bird. He speaks of giant, gray canoes that have appeared in the bay, so large they dwarf the tallest trees. They are not made of wood, he says, his eyes wide with a mixture of fear and excitement. They are made of the same impossible material as the sky creature metal. And from their bellies, they are birthing smaller boats, which are bringing men to the shore. A council of elders is held. The debate is fierce. Some argue this is a dangerous intrusion, that these are hostile spirits who must be driven away. Others, their curiosity piqued by the runner's tales, argue that this must be understood. It is decided that a small party of warriors and elders, yourself included, will go to the coast to witness this for yourselves. The journey is tense. The jungle, usually a place of comfort and familiarity, feels watchful. Every snap of a twig, every call of a bird, seems to carry a new, unknown meaning. After a day's trek, you finally emerge from the thick undergrowth onto a high ridge overlooking the bay. You stop dead. The runner's words did not prepare you for the reality. Anchored in the turquoise water are several colossal shapes. They are a flat, lifeless gray against the vibrant blues and greens of the island. They don't move with the grace of a canoe. They sit squat and immovable on the water, symbols of an immense, brutal IST power. You have no words for them. Ship is a concept you don't possess. To you, they are floating islands of metal, silent and menacing. And from these islands, a steady stream of smaller, noisy craft are zipping back and forth to the beach, creating a foamy wake on the calm surface of the bay. But it's the beach itself that steals your breath. It has been transformed. Where once there was only sand and palm trees, there is now a chaotic, swarming hive of activity. Men are shouting in a language that sounds like a series of harsh, barking commands. These are the men the runner spoke of. They are pale, some with skin burned red by the sun. They wear identical, drab green clothing unstrange, hard shells on their heads. They move with a purpose you can't comprehend, hauling boxes, rolling giant black rubber rings, and unfurling massive sheets of canvas. You watch, hidden in the foliage, for hours. You see them work with an unsettling efficiency. A line of men pass heavy wooden crates from a boat onto the shore. Another group uses strange, gleaming tools to chop down coconut palms with terrifying speed. A small, noisy, four-wheeled contraption that moves without being pushed or pulled. A jeep. Though you don't know, the word bounces along the sand, carrying men and materials. It's a scene of organized, overwhelming industry. One of the most baffling things is their sheer number. You've seen traders and missionaries before, maybe a handful at a time. But this is an army. There are hundreds of them. They seem to spring from the metal islands like ants from a nest. Where do they all come from? How can so many people exist in one place? The very idea of a city like New York or San Francisco is as alien to you as the concept of another galaxy. Some anthropologists point to this moment, the visual shock of overwhelming numbers and logistics, as a key factor in the formation of cargo cults. It was just the technology. It was the sheer scale of human organization, something that would have seemed impossible to a small, clan-based society. They are not all the same. While most are pale-skinned, you see others among them with skin as dark as your own. These men also wear the green uniforms and follow the same strange rituals. This is a point of deep confusion, one that will be debated in the village for a long time. Are these dark-skinned strangers their slaves? Or are they members of this powerful new tribe? The existence of African-American soldiers in the Pacific Theater, a simple fact of U.S. military demographics, becomes a source of intense theological and social speculation for you and your people. Historians still discuss how the presence of these soldiers complicated the islanders' attempts to categorize the newcomers. As dusk begins to fall, you and the others retreat back into the jungle, your minds reeling. You have witnessed an invasion, but not a hostile one. They have, for the most part, completely ignored you, as if you are just another part of the scenery. This is almost more unsettling. Their power is so immense that you are not even a consideration. You return to your village not with answers, but with 1,000 new questions. You saw the metal birds, and now you have seen the metal islands that birth the men who command them. The world hasn't just gotten bigger, it has tilted on its axis. And you have the distinct, terrifying feeling that your small island is about to be washed over by a tidal wave of change. The presence of the strangers on the coast becomes a fact of life. At first, you and your people keep your distance, observing from the safe, green cloak of the jungle. But curiosity is a powerful force, and so is need. Their noisy machines scare away the game, and their sudden occupation of the bay has made your usual fishing grounds a no-go zone. Slowly, cautiously, contact is made. It's not a grand meeting of chiefs and commanders. It's more gradual, more mundane. A few of your bolder young men, perhaps pushed by hunger or a dare, venture down to the edge of the sprawling camp. They are met not with hostility, but with a casual wave and, sometimes, a grin. Then comes the moment that changes everything. A soldier, maybe bored or maybe feeling a pang of pity, tosses a small, shiny object to one of the onlookers. It's a can of Spam. No one knows what it is. It's heavy metallic, then completely sealed, using stones on shell tools to finally pry it open. Inside is a strange, pink, salty meat. It tastes unlike anything you've ever eaten. It's delicious. This is your first encounter with cargo. Soon, this word, a pidgin English term that you quickly adopt, enters your vocabulary and your world. Cargo is not just one thing. It's the endless supply of goods that seem to flow from the giant metal ships as if from a divine spring. You see boxes of tinned fish, bags of rice, and something they call sugar that is sweeter than any fruit you have ever tasted. You see them eating soft, square slices of bread, a food that doesn't need to be dug from the ground or harvested from a tree. But it's not just food. Cargo is the sharp steel axe that can fell a tree in 1/10 of the time it takes with a stone one. It's the sturdy canvas tent that is completely waterproof, unlike your thatched huts that drip during a downpour. It's the miraculous matches that can create fire in an instant, with no need for the laborious friction of rubbing sticks together. It's the soft, machine-woven blankets that are warmer than anything you've ever slept under. And, most prized of all, it's the cigarettes and the sweet, dark, bubbling water called Coca-Cola. You watch in utter astonishment as these green-clad men use these items with a casual, almost wasteful abundance. They open a can of food, eat half, then toss the rest. They smoke a cigarette down to a nub and flick it away. They seem to have an infinite supply. This is a profound conceptual shock. In your world, everything is the result of hard, visible labor. You want a canoe. You must find the right tree, fell it, hollow it out, and carve it over weeks or months. You want a yam. You must clear the land, plant the tuber, tend it, and wait for the harvest. The connection between effort and reward is direct, tangible. But these men, they don't seem to do any of the work that, in your understanding, produces things. You don't see them weaving cloth, forging metal, or growing tobacco. That comes off the boats, which come from the sky birds, which come from where? From a magical, invisible place. The source of the cargo is a complete mystery. This is the core logical puzzle that will eventually give birth to the new belief system. The American soldiers, in your eyes, are not the makers of the cargo. They are the receivers. They must have a special connection to the source, the ancestors or gods who are actually providing these goods. They are the priests, not the creators. Some anthropologists, like Peter Lawrence studying the similar movements in New Guinea, argued that this interpretation was entirely rational within the islanders' existing worldview, where material wealth was often seen as a blessing from the spiritual realm, not a product of industrial manufacturing. A particularly strange piece of cargo you observe is paper. The men spend a lot of time looking at these flimsy white sheets with black markings on them. They make marks on them with small sticks. Sometimes showing these papers to another man results in a box of cargo being given to them. Clearly, these papers hold a special power, a kind of magical incantation that summons the goods. You don't see it as administrative paperwork or a requisition form. You see it as a ritual object, a talisman. The river of cargo flows, and it begins to trickle into your village, sometimes through trade, sometimes as payment for labor, and sometimes just as gifts. And with every can of peaches, every steel knife, every Zippo lighter, the value of pigs and yams, your traditional measures of wealth, is suddenly thrown into question. Why spend a year raising a prize pig when a day's work for the soldiers can earn you a box of tin beef that will feed your family for a week? The elders, the traditional holders of power and prestige, find their authority waning. Their knowledge of yam cultivation is becoming less important than knowing a few words of the stranger's barking language. The social fabric of your society is beginning to unravel, and a new one is being woven, thread by shimmering, metallic thread. As you spend more time observing the newcomers, you start to notice that their lives are filled with bizarre, repetitive, and seemingly pointless activities. To your eyes, these are not drills, administrative tasks, or expressions of military discipline. They are clearly religious ceremonies, rituals performed with painstaking precision to please the cargo gods. Every morning at the same time, a loud, piercing sound, a bugle call. Though you don't know that word echoes through the camp. The men emerge from their tents, line up in perfectly straight rows, and stand unnaturally still. Two of them then approach it all-metal pole. They attach a piece of brightly colored cloth, red, white, and blue with stars and stripes, to a rope and slowly, ceremoniously, raise it to the top. All the other men stand facing the pole, some holding their hands to their foreheads in a strange salute. They stay like this for a moment of complete silence, a collective reverence directed at the patterned fabric fluttering in the breeze. What else could this be but a morning prayer? A ritual to greet the day and show respect to the powerful symbol that must surely connect them to the source of the cargo. The flag, to you, is not a national emblem. It is a sacred totem, an icon imbued with immense spiritual power. Its colors and patterns are a code, a direct line to the ancestors of the white men. The men engage in another strange ritual. They march. They walk in unison, their legs and arms swinging in an unnatural, synchronized rhythm. A man at the front shouts commands. and the whole group turns or stops as one. They do this over and over, marching back and forth on a cleared patch of ground. They aren't going anywhere. They are simply moving together in a prescribed way. From a practical standpoint, it's utterly useless. Therefore, it must be spiritual. It must be a kind of ritual dance, a moving meditation designed to maintain their connection to the cargo spirits. You watch, mesmerized, trying to memorize the steps and the shouted words, convinced they are a crucial part of the formula. Then there are the men who sit in tents filled with crackling, humming boxes. They hold a black object to their mouth and speak into it, then press another part of it to their ear and listen intently. They speak to the air, to a disembodied voice only they can hear. They make notes on those powerful pieces of paper. This is obviously a high form of ritual, a direct communication with the spirit world. These men are the high priests. They are the ones who are actually summoning the cargo. The radio operator, hunched over his transmitter, becomes a figure of immense mystery and power in your eyes. He is the conduit. The words he speaks are the magic spells. There's a subtle but fascinating debate among historians about how much the islanders truly believed these were spirits versus how much they were simply trying to understand a new and overwhelming system. Were they really thinking magic, or was it more like, this is their version of a yam-growing ritual? It looks different, but the purpose must be the same. The line is blurry because in your worldview, the spiritual and the practical are one and the same. A yam ritual is magic. You also notice their obsession with order. Everything has its place. The tents are in straight lines. The boxes are stacked in neat, identical piles. Tools are cleaned and put away in specific chests. They even wear the same clothes and have the same short haircut. This uniformity is another piece of the puzzle. In your village, individuality is expressed in body paint, in the style of a carved comb, in personal adornments. This total suppression of individuality must be a form of spiritual discipline, a way of erasing the self to better serve the collective and appease the cargo gods. It's a kind of aesthetic asceticism. Even their leisure time is filled with ritual. They sit in groups looking at small, stiff pieces of paper with markings on them, playing cards and exchange them back and forth. This is clearly a form of divination, using sacred objects to predict the future or gain favor from the spirits. You and your friends begin to catalog these behaviors. The morning flag raising, the marching, the radio speaking, the stacking of boxes, the saluting of certain men who have more shiny things on their collars than others. You don't understand the why, but you are becoming convinced of the what. These are the rituals. This is the new Kaestam. This is the work they perform to make the cargo appear. The old way, the Kaestam of your ancestors, involved rituals to make yams grow and pigs multiply. The new way, the Kaestam of the Americans, involves these strange, particular ceremonies to make tins of spam and cartons of cigarettes materialize from the sky and the sea. The logic is flawless. The only task left is to learn the rituals perfectly. The day eventually comes when the world of the observers and the observed finally formally collides. The strangers need more space. Their operation is expanding, and the jungle is in their way. But more than that, they need to create one of their most sacred and mysterious sites, a place for the metal birds to land. A man with more shiny bits on his collar than usual, accompanied by another man who has learned a few words of your language, approaches your village chief. Through a clumsy and frustrating series of gestures and broken translations, a proposal is made. They want to hire your village's men. The job: to clear a very long, very wide, and very, very flat strip of land. The pay they offer is astonishing. Not in pigs or shells, the currency, you understand, but in cargo itself. They promise tins of meat, bags of rice, tobacco, and steel tools like machetes and knives. The offer is too good to refuse. It sends a shockwave through the village. The value of a man's labor has just been completely redefined overnight. And so, you find yourself with a strange new job. You join dozens of men from your vigilant section of jungle. The Americans provide the tools. They hand you a steel axe. The first time you hold it, You're amazed by its weight, its balance, its impossibly sharp edge. With one swing, you bite deeper into a tree than you could with 10 swings of your best stone axe. They also give you long-handled shovels and sturdy picks. These are objects of power. The work is brutally hard, harder than anything you've ever done. Under the relentless tropical sun, you chop, you dig, you hoe. You tear down ancient trees that your ancestors believed were home to spirits, filling in gullies and flattening mounds, your muscles screaming in protest. The Americans supervise, shouting their strange, barking words, pointing, and consulting their magic paper sheets. They use their noisy, self-propelled machines to move earth and pull out massive roots, doing the work of 20 men in a few minutes. But as you work, you are not just a laborer. You are an apprentice and ethnographer. You are watching and trying to understand the deeper meaning of your task. You are not just clearing a path. You are, in your mind, participating in the construction of a sacred site. The purpose of this great, flat road is a subject of intense debate during your evening meals. You call it the place below plain. It's obvious that it's meant to attract the metal birds. You've seen them fly over. Now you understand they need a special kind of ground to entice them to land. This strip of earth is a kind of welcome mat for the sky gods. The construction itself is filled with rituals you diligently observe. The Americans use long, tight strings to make sure the edges are perfectly straight. They use a strange device with a bubble of liquid inside a spirit level to ensure the ground is flat. They measure everything meticulously with long, numbered ribbons of cloth or metal. This precision is key. It's not enough to make a flat space. It has to be a perfectly flat space, aligned in a specific way for the magic to work. This obsessive measuring confirms your belief that this is a spiritual, not a merely practical endeavor. Historians often point out that this was the islanders' first direct, hands-on experience with Western engineering and logistics. But they interpreted it through their own cultural lens. They saw the what but invented their own why. The surveyor with his theodotyle wasn't seen as a technician applying trigonometer. He was a shaman, divining the correct sacred alignment for this massive altar. One of the more peculiar details you notice is that the Americans clear the land far beyond the edges of the strip itself. They cut down trees that are nowhere near the landing area. This seems wasteful and illogical, until a theory emerges. The sky birds must be able to see this sacred ground from a great distance. It must be a clear, unambiguous signal, visible from the heavens. As you work, you are paid daily. At the end of a long, exhausting day, you line up and are handed your wages, a can of beef, a pouch of tobacco, a handful of cigarettes. The connection is made. You perform this specific work, clearing the land in this specific way, and the cargo appears. It is the most direct evidence you have yet encountered. The logic seems undeniable. The ritual of flattening the earth summons the goods. You don't fully grasp that the Americans have a pre-existing, vast supply chain and that your wages are just a tiny fraction of it. You see a direct cause and effect. A.B. Ritual cargo. Finally, after weeks of back-breaking labor, it is done. A massive, raw, red earth scar cuts through the green jungle. It's wider and longer than any space you have ever seen. It feels powerful, humming with potential. You have done your part. You have helped build the altar. Now all you can do is watch and wait for the gods to arrive. Amidst the chaos and wonder of the American camp, one symbol starts to stand out from all the others. It's simple, stark, and seems to be associated with a particularly potent kind of magic, the magic of healing. It is a bold red cross. You see it painted on the side of specific tents, on boxes, and even on the sides of some of the wheeled contraptions. Your first significant encounter with it is deeply personal. A child from your village falls sick with a high fever. In the old KAS dom, this would be the work of a disgruntled spirit, and the remedy would involve a complex ceremony led by a village shaman, using special leaves and chants to appease the spirit. The family tries this. They perform the rituals. But the child only gets worse, his breathing becoming shallow and dragged. In desperation, hearing stories of the Americans' power, the father carries his son to the stranger's camp. He is directed with gestures of urgency towards a large tent marked with that ubiquitous red cross. You and a few others follow at a distance, watching with a mixture of skepticism and hope. A man in a white coat, a different kind of authority, examines the child. He doesn't burn sacred leaves. He uses a small, shiny metal tool to look in the child's ears and throat. He presses a cold, metal disc attached to rubber tubes against the child's chest, listening to something inside the stethoscope, an object of profound mystery. Then he performs the ultimate act of magic. He fills a small glass tube with a clear liquid, attaches a needle, and pierces the child's skin. To you, this is terrifying. Piercing the skin is a way to let evil spirits in, not to drive them out. You expect the child to cry out, to be harmed by this violation. But within hours, the fever begins to recede. By the next day, the child is sitting up, weak but smiling. By the end of the week, he is back in the village, running and playing as if he had never been sick. The news spreads like wildfire. The Red Cross is not just a symbol, it is a source of immense power. It can defeat the evil spirits that cause sickness. The man in the white coat is a new kind of shaman, one whose magic is faster and more potent than anything your own healers can muster. The needle is his magic wand. The clear liquid is his potion. This event solidifies the Red Cross as a key element in the emerging new theology. You start to see it everywhere. Crates marked with the Red Cross are treated with special care. They contain not just the healing potions, but also clean white cloth for bandages, special food for the sick, and other miraculous items. The men who work in the Red Cross tent are seen as a special kind of priest, masters of life and death. It's a classic case of what historians call syncretis, the blending of different belief systems. You are not abandoning your belief in spirits. Instead, you are incorporating this new, powerful symbol into your existing framework. The Red Cross becomes a more effective tool for dealing with the same old problems. It's an upgrade. Why use a stone axe when a steel one is available? Why rely on a slow and certain chant when a quick, certain needle is at hand? There's a fascinating, if somewhat niche, academic debate on whether the islanders distinguished between the Red Cross organization and the Christian cross symbol brought by earlier missionaries. It seems the visual power of the symbol in this new context completely overshadowed its previous, more abstract religious meaning. The Red Cross of the medics was tangible. It was directly linked to healing and supplies. It worked. You begin to see other, related symbols of power. Des, or you, es, a, are stamped on everything, on the crates, on the vehicles, on the uniforms. These are clearly powerful glyphs, part of the same magical language as the Red Cross. They must be the name of the tribe, or perhaps the family name of the great ancestor spirit who provides the cargo. You start to pay closer attention to the medics' rituals. They are obsessed with cleanliness. They wash their hands constantly. They boil their metal tools in water. This isn't seen as a practical application of germ theory, a concept as alien as astrophysics. It is seen as a purification ritual, a necessary step to ensure the magic of the healing potions is not corrupted. You and your friends start to secretly copy the symbol. A piece of charcoal on a smooth stone, the red juice of a berry on a piece of bark. You draw the Red Cross. It feels powerful, forbidden. You are borrowing a piece of their magic, hoping to harness a sliver of its power for yourself. You don't fully understand it, but you know it's important. It's a key. Just like the straight lines of the airfield and the rhythmic marching, the Red Cross is a vital component of the grand ritual. It is a beacon, a sign to the cargo gods that you are ready to receive their blessings, not just of food and tools, but of life and health itself. This simple geometric shape is becoming one of the central pillars in the cathedral of your new faith. As the days turn into weeks, and the weeks into months, a name begins to circulate through the villages. It's a foreign name, one that feels strange on your tongue, but it's spoken with a growing sense of reverence and hope. The name is John from. No one is quite sure where the name came from first. Perhaps it was a mishearing of a soldier saying, "I'm John, from America." Perhaps it was a name someone invented to give a face to the faceless forces that were changing their world. Or perhaps, as the believers will tell you, he was a real entity who actually appeared. The origin of the name John from is one of the great, enduring mysteries of this entire phenomenon, a puzzle that anthropologists and historians still picket with no definitive answer. It's a perfect example of a myth's murky birth. The story of John from coalesces from whispers and rumors. He is described as an American, but not just any American. He is the one. He is the unseen king, the spiritual leader of the men in green. He lives in a land of unimaginable wealth called America, a place deep inside the earth, or perhaps at the heart of your own volcano, yes sir. The soldiers you see, with their jeeps and their cigarettes, are merely his messengers, his advance party. John from is the true source of the cargo. He sent these men to prepare the way for his own, much grander arrival. The prophecies associated with him are grand and transformative. He has promised to return, and on that day, the world will be turned upside down. The great volcano will erupt, but not with destructive lava. Instead, it will spew forth an endless river of cargo for everyone. The hills will flatten to make way for more airfields. The white colonial administrators and missionaries, who have long held power over you with their laws and their God, will be driven away. In their place, John from would establish a new order, one where your people will have all the cargo they could ever want. There will be no more sickness, no more hard labor. It will be an age of abundance and equality. This is an incredibly powerful message. It's not just about getting free stuff. It's a message of liberation and empowerment. It taps into decades of quiet resentment against the colonial powers. The John from movement isn't just a religious cult. It's also a political one. A proto-nationalist uprising cloaked in millennial prophecy. The persona of John from is fashionably specific. He is often described as having a white face but a soft, gentle voice. Sometimes he is said to look and sound like one of the dark-skinned American soldiers, which adds another layer of complexity. This flexibility in his description allows more people to project their hopes onto him. He is everything to everyone, a messiah, a revolutionary, a provider. The belief in John from gives you and your people a new sense of purpose and agency. You are no longer just passive observers of the American strange rituals. You are now active participants in a divine plan. The work you do clearing the jungle, helping around the camp is not just labor for pay. It is holy work, preparing for the coming of John. This reframes your entire experience. The established authorities, the British and French colonial government and the Presbyterian missionaries, see the rise of the John from movement as a serious threat. They view it as a dangerous, pagan backlash against their civilizing influence. They try to suppress it, the prophets who claim to have spoken with John. But this only strengthens the movement. Every arrest is seen as proof that the colonial powers are afraid of John from S power. The leaders become martyrs, and the belief goes underground, spreading from village to village through secret networks. A little-known fact is that some of the John from prophecies incorporated elements of Christian eschatology, learned from the very missionaries who opposed them. The idea of a Messiah returning at the end of days, a great judgment, and the establishment of a new kingdom was a familiar framework. The islanders simply swapped out Jesus for John, and heaven for a paradise filled with refrigerators and Coca-Cola. It's another brilliant example of syncretist, borrowing the structure of your enemy's story to build a narrative of your own liberation. So now you have a name for your God. He is John from. He is from America. He is from America. He has chosen you, his loyal followers. Your new mission is clear. It's not enough to just watch the Americans and copy their rituals. You must actively reject the old ways imposed by the missionaries and colonialists. You must purify yourselves and prepare your island for his grand arrival. The confusion of the past few months is hardening into a clear, sharp-edged faith. And this faith has a name. You are now living in a dream. The world has been remade, and it is a world of bewildering, intoxicating abundance, which will later be looked back on with a powerful, almost painful nostalgia. Is your golden age. The trickle of cargo has become a flood. Your work on the airfield, and 100 other manual tasks for the American military base, has infused your society with a level of material wealth that was previously unimaginable. The line for daily wages is a social event, a place of excited chatter where you compare your earnings. You might receive a can of peaches, a bar of soap, a pack of Lucky Strike cigarettes, and a small bag of rice, all for a single day's work. You take these treasures back to your village, and the entire social dynamic shifts. The traditional economy, based on the slow, patient cultivation of yams and the raising of pigs, is virtually obsolete. Why would a young man spend months tending a yam garden when he can earn more food in a single afternoon hauling crates? A prize pig, with its magnificent circular tusk, once the ultimate symbol of wealth and status, can now be traded for a case of Spam and a few cartons of cigarettes. Some elders lament this, seeing the erosion of the old ways, but their voices are drowned out by the sheer, undeniable allure of the new prosperity. You eat meat and fish regularly, a protein boost that makes you feel stronger. You sweeten your food with refined sugar, a jolt of pure energy that is incredibly addictive. You wear discarded American military trousers or turds, which are far more durable than your traditional loincloths. You sleep under a wool blanket, a luxury of warmth and softness on cool nights. The steel machete you earned has made you astonishingly efficient. Clearing land, gathering firewood, building a hut, tasks that once took days now take hours. This creates a new and unfamiliar phenomenon. Leisure time. With your basic needs for food and shelter met so easily, you have hours in the day with little to do. This free time becomes fertile ground for the stories of John from to grow, for the new rituals to be discussed and refined. This era is also one of relative equality. The cargo flows so freely that nearly everyone has access to it. The old hierarchies, based on lineage and the accumulation of traditional wealth, are flattened. A young, strong man who is a good worker can become wealthier in this new currency of cargo than a respected elder. This is both liberating and destabilizing. A particularly fascinating and often overlooked aspect of this time was the introduction of modern medicine as a form of cargo. Beyond the dramatic cures and the Red Cross tents, soldiers would hand out aspirin for headaches, bandages for cuts, and antiseptic ointment for sores. These small miracles further cemented the idea that the Americans had mastery over the physical world in a way you had never conceived. The debate over whether this was a positive destruction or a cultural destruction continues among scholars. Was it a necessary step towards modernity or the beginning of a dependency that would be devastating when the source was cut off? You see the Americans' behavior and it only reinforces your beliefs. They seem to have so much stuff they don't even value it. You watch a soldier get frustrated with a faulty Zippo lighter, a marvel of instant fire you would treasure for a lifetime, and simply toss it into the bushes. You might sneak back later, find it, and spend days patiently tinkering with it until you get it to work, feeling as if you've rescued a sacred artifact. This is a time of surreal juxtaposition. You might see a warrior, his face painted in the traditional patterns of his clan, proudly smoking an American cigarette. A woman might use an empty tin can, a piece of industrial waste, as a pot for king, valuing it more than any clay pot she could make. You learn to use new tools, eat new foods, and even speak a new, simplified language, the pidgin English that allows basic communication with the soldiers. The world feels full of promise. The prophecies of John from don't seem like distant dreams. They feel like they are coming true right before your eyes. The Americans are here, the cargo is flowing, and life is better and easier than it has ever been. This, you believe, is just the beginning. This is the preview of the paradise John from will bring. You have no reason to believe it will ever end. You are living in the warm, blissful center of a bubble, completely unaware of the vast, global conflict that has created it. and utterly unprepared for the day when that bubble will inevitably pop. The change, when it comes, is not a sudden cataclysm. It's a slow, creeping unease, a subtle shift in the atmosphere of the American camp. It begins with whispers, not in your language, but in theirs. You start to catch words you don't understand, but the tone is new. Words like war over home. The frantic, purposeful energy of the base begins to wind down. You first notice it in the small things. The constant roar of supply planes overhead becomes less frequent. A week might go by with only 1 or 2 sightings of the metal birds, instead of the daily procession you'd grown accustomed to. The giant gray ships, the floating metal islands that have been a permanent fixture in the bay, begin to disappear one by one, sailing off towards the horizon until they are just specks not to be replaced. The soldiers' behavior changes too. There's less marching, less drilling. The strange rituals that you've so carefully studied and begun to emulate seem less important to them now. In their place, there's a new mood, a kind of restless, joyful anticipation that you don't share and can't quite understand. They laugh more loudly, they gather in groups looking at photos from home, and they talk constantly about leaving. This is deeply confusing. Why would anyone want to leave paradise? You have everything here, an endless supply of cargo, a perfect climate, an easy life. Where could they possibly be going that is better than this? The concept of home as a place you long for, a place with family and a life you've been separated from by a world war, is completely alien to you. Your home is here. It has always been here. The idea of leaving it is nonsensical. The work begins to dry up. The big construction projects are finished. They no longer need huge crews of laborers. The daily wage lines get shorter, the payments less generous. One day they might pay you in cigarettes instead of tin meat. The next, you might be turned away entirely with a shrug and a gesture that says no more work. The river of cargo, which once seemed like a mighty, inexhaustible force of nature, is tapering off of supplies, creates the first real stirrings of panic. The easy abundance is ending. The canned goods you've stored are being depleted. And for the first time in months, you have to think about going back to the old ways of finding food. But you've neglected the yam gardens. The skills of hunting with the spear feel rusty. You've grown dependent on the easy magic of cargo. One of the most poignant and academically debated aspects of this period is the islanders' interpretation of the Americans' desire to leave. Was it seen as a sign of displeasure? Had you and your people done something wrong to offend Jonfrom, causing him to recall his messengers? Or was it, as some oral traditions suggest, seen as a necessary transitional phase? Perhaps the soldiers had to leave to make way for Jonfrom himself to arrive. The ambiguity of the situation allowed for multiple, often contradictory, interpretations to coexist. You talk with the other men from your village. The theories fly. Maybe the rituals need to be performed more precisely. Maybe not enough people believe in Jonfrom. Maybe the colonial missionaries with their jealous god have cast a spell to drive the Americans away. The prophets of Jonfrom preach that this is a test of faith. They insist that the soldiers are leaving, yes, but that this is part of the plan. They must clear out before the real, permanent paradise can begin. A small, sad detail that often gets overlooked is the personal relationships that had formed. Some soldiers had made genuine friends among the islanders, trading stories, sharing jokes, and creating small bonds of camaraderie across the vast cultural gulf. The departure was, for some on both sides, a genuinely sorrowful event, a severing of these fragile, personal connections. Then the day comes when you see them actively packing. Not just their personal belongings, but the camp itself. They take down the tents that have been homes for months. They begin stacking crates not for distribution, but for departure. The dismantling of the base is the opposite of its construction. It's a process of erasure, of undoing the magic. And as you watch them, a dreadful new question begins to form in your mind. They brought all this cargo with them. Surely, they won't take it all away again. Surely, they will leave it for you, the faithful who helped them and who believe in their god Jonfrom. You watch, and you wait, and you hope. The hope that the departing Americans will leave their bounty behind dies a spectacular, bewildering death. What you are about to witness is perhaps the most incomprehensible act of all. An event so profoundly illogical and wasteful from your perspective that it will be seared into the collective memory of your people for generations. It will become a core element of the John from theology, the ultimate proof from theology, the ultimate proof of the cargo's spiritual non-human nature. The soldiers have finished packing what they intend to take with them. The ships are waiting in the bay, but there is so much left over, mountains of it. You see entire stacks of canvas tents, pyramids of unopened ammunition boxes, and rows upon rows of those magicals, self-propelled vehicles, the jeeps, the trucks, the bulldozers gleaming under the sun. There are engines still in their crates, spare tires by the hundred, uniforms, boots, tools, and countless boxes of canned food. It's a treasure hoard beyond your wildest dreams. This is it. This must be the inheritance John from promised, the parting gift from his messengers. You and your fellow villagers watch from the edge of the jungle, your hearts pounding with anticipation. This collection of cargo could sustain your entire island for a lifetime. It is the physical manifestation of the paradise you have been promised. Then, the soldiers begin the ritual. And it is a ritual. They start up the engines of the jeeps and trucks. But instead of loading them onto the ships, they drive them to a high cliff overlooking a deep part of the bay. One by one, a soldier will drive a vehicle to the very edge, aim it towards the sparkling blue water, and jump out at the last second, letting the machine roar over the precipice and crash into the sea below. You watch in stunned silence as a jeep, a thing of immense power and value, tumbles end over end, hitting the water with a tremendous splash and sinking into the abyss, gone forever. Then another follows, and another. It makes no sense. It's like watching a man burn his own yam harvest. It's like watching a chief kill his most prized pigs for no reason. This is not just waste, it is sacrilege. It is an act of madness. They move on to the other goods. They use their bulldozers, those metal beasts that can move the earth itself, to dig massive pits. Into these pits, they throw everything else. Boxes of Coca-Cola, radios, generators, unopened crates of tools, rifles. They pour gasoline over the piles and set them on fire. A thick, black, acrid smoke billows into the sky, carrying the smell of burning rubber and melting plastic. Then they turn their attention to the sea again. They load barges, the flat, ugly boats with mountains of supplies. They tow them out to the deepest part of the channel, a place now known as $1 Million Point. And there, they simply push it all overboard. You see entire crates of goods, things you have worked for and craved, bobbing on the surface for a moment before succumbing to the weight of their own value and sinking into the dark water. Why? The question hangs in the air, thick and unanswerable. Why would they do this? The American military had its reasons, of course. From a cold, logistical standpoint, it was cheaper to destroy the surplus equipment than to transport it halfway across the world back to the United States. They also wanted to avoid flooding the local economy with goods, which could destabilize it, a concern that, ironically, was a little too late. But you don't know any of this. You can't conceive of a world where a jeep is considered disposable. So you must find an explanation that fits your reality. The conclusion you and your people arrive at is both logical and profound. The cargo cannot be owned by mortals. It belongs to the spirit world. The soldiers were merely its temporary custodians. When their time on the island was over, they had to return the cargo to its source, the sea and the earth, so that it could be recycled and redistributed later. This act of destruction wasn't destruction at all. It was a ritual of return. They were planting the seeds of future cargo. This is a critical turning point. The idea that cargo is manufactured in a factory is discarded. No sane person would manufacture a jeep and then dump it in the ocean. The cargo must be a natural, renewable resource, one that grows or materializes when the correct rituals are performed. The Americans weren't destroying their wealth. They were performing the final, most important ritual of all, ensuring the great cycle of cargo could continue. Historians still marvel at this interpretation. It's a stunning example of how the human mind can take a set of baffling observations and weave them into a coherent and internally consistent narrative. The million-dollar point event becomes a sacred story, a parable about the true nature of wealth. It proves, beyond any doubt, that cargo is not of this world, and it provides the single most important clue for what you must do next. The Americans have shown you how to plant the seeds. Now, you just have to figure out how to make them grow. The last ship weighs anchor. It's a hazy afternoon, and the great gray vessel makes surprisingly little noise as it turns and points its bow towards the vast. You stand on the shore, the same shore where you first saw them land, and watch it shrink. It doesn't take long. Soon it's just a smudge on the horizon, and then it's nothing. The silence they leave behind is heavier and more profound than the silence that came before they arrived. It's an absence. The constant hum of generators, the roar of jeep engines, the shouts of men, the crackle of radios, the entire soundscape of your life for the past year has been erased. All that's left is the gentle lapping of waves, the rustle of palm fronds, and the distant, familiar grumble of the volcano. The world has returned to its old soundtrack, but the tune feels wrong. It's the sound of emptiness. You walk through the abandoned camp. It's a ghost town, a collection of desolate, empty spaces. The ground is scarred and trampled, littered with the refuse the soldiers didn't bother to burn or sink. A rusted tin can, a frayed piece of rope, a single mud-caked boot. These are the sad, mundane relics of a departed pantheon, the place that was once the vibrant heart of the world. The source of all miracles is now just a junkyard. The magic has evaporated. You look up at the sky. It is just a sky again. Blue, empty, silent. For months it was a highway, a conduit for the metal birds that brought the manna from heaven. Now, it is just a ceiling. You find yourself scanning it out of habit, listening for that faint, but there is nothing. The connection to the world of John has been severed. The days that follow are deeply disorienting. The most immediate problem is practical. The cargo is gone. The easy food, the miraculous tools, the potent medicines all vanished. You are forced back upon your own resources, and you find them wanting. The yam gardens have been neglected for too long. The jungle, once a reliable larder, seems to have been picked clean in the areas around the former base. For the first time, your community faces the real possibility of hunger. Stretched and dray-woven by the cargo economy now sags. The brief, glorious era of equality is over. Those who were smart were lucky enough to have hoarded a small stash of cargo, a few cans of beef, a pouch of tobacco, a steel file, are now the wealthy elite. Those who lived day to day believing the flow would never stop have nothing. Tensions rise. Arguments break out over the last remaining scraps of the Americans' legacy. The unity forged in the shared wonder of their arrival begins to fracture in the shared misery of their departure. This period of loss and confusion is something anthropologists refer to as a revitalization crisis. An external force, in this case, the U.S. military presence, completely disrupts a society's structure, economy, and belief system. When that force is removed, the society is left in a vacuum, struggling to make sense of the new reality and desperate to restore the lost state of abundance. This crisis is the fertile soil in which new, radical belief systems can take root and flourish. You feel a profound sense of loss that goes beyond the material. You miss the excitement, the sense of living at the center of something momentous. Life has reverted to being small and predictable, but the memory of it being large and miraculous makes the old reality unbearable. It's like tasting sugar for the first time and then being forced to eat bland roots for the rest of your life. The world has lost its color. A little-known psychological effect observed in these communities was a kind of collective depression. The sudden withdrawal of stimulation, purpose, and readily available calories had a tangible impact on morale and public health, even before malnutrition became a serious issue. You and the others gather in the evenings, not around a crackling fire, but in the dark, speaking in hushed tones. The elders, whose authority was so diminished during the Golden Age, try to reassert the old custom. They say this was a strange fever, a dream that has now passed. They urge a return to the ancestral ways, to the rituals for yams and pigs. But it's too late. You can't unsee what you've seen. You can't unknow the existence of cargo. The old KAS dome feels inadequate now. It can give you a yam, yes, but it can't give you a jeep. The prophets of John from offer a different, more compelling explanation. This, they say, is not an ending. The Americans were just the messengers. They have gone home to tell John from that the way is prepared. Now, it is up to you to prove your worthiness, to show that you have learned the rituals and are ready for his return. The emptiness is not a void, it is a challenge. The silent sky is not empty, it is listening. The silence stretches from days into weeks. The sky remains stubbornly empty. The sea delivers nothing but driftwood and seaweed. The ghost camp on the coast rots and rusts, a monument to a paradise lost. The initial shock of the departure gives way to a deeper, more troubling emotion, a gnawing, collective anxiety. A single question echoes in the silent spaces of your mind and in the hushed conversations in the village. What did we do wrong? The logic is inescapable. The Americans came, the cargo flowed. The Americans left, the cargo stopped. This establishes a clear cause and effect relationship. But the departure itself was so strange, so illogical, especially the destruction of the surplus goods. It couldn't have been a simple withdrawal. It must have been a reaction. They left because of something. The community turns inward, engaging in a period of intense, soul-searching introspection. Every interaction with the Americans is replayed, re-examined, and analyzed for clues. Did we offend them somehow? Was our labor not good enough? Did we fail to show the proper respect for the cargo? Theories begin to multiply, each one attempting to diagnose the fatal error. One popular theory focuses on the missionaries and the colonial government. For years, they had told you to abandon your KAS dome, to worship their God, to follow their rules. When the Americans came, you eagerly embraced them and their ways, turning your back on the old colonial masters. Perhaps this angered the Americans' God, John from. He saw you were still partially under the influence of the false prophets. A faction arises, arguing that the only way to bring John from back is to completely, undoubtedly purge every last vestige of European colonial influence. This means boycotting the missionary schools, refusing to pay colonial taxes, and rejecting the Christian God. It's a radical, political interpretation of a spiritual problem. Another theory, more introspective, focuses on your own people's shortcomings. Maybe you were too greedy. Maybe you squabbled too much over the cargo. Maybe you didn't share it according to the proper spiritual principles. You remember the arguments over a can of peaches, the jealousy when a neighbor received a better blanket. The cargo was a blessing, and perhaps you treated it like a mere commodity. This theory calls for a new moral code, a return to communal harmony, but this time centered around the eventual return of the cargo. Then there is the most compelling and influential theory, the one that will ultimately win out. It is a theory based on a simple, powerful observation, imitation. The Americans received cargo because they performed a very specific set of rituals. You observed these rituals, but you were only a spectator, a paid helper. You never took it upon yourselves to perform them with the proper intent and precision. You helped them build their sacred airfield, but you never built one of your own. You watched them march, but you never marched yourselves. You saw them talking into their magic boxes, but you never tried to talk to the spirits yourself. This is the crucial insight. You were just the groundskeepers for the church. The Americans didn't leave because you did something wrong. They left because their work was done. They were the teachers, showing you the way. Now, the student must put the lessons into practice. This interpretation is incredibly empowering. It shifts the blame from an external offense to an internal failure of action, and a failure of action can be corrected. It transforms the community from passive victims of abandonment into active agents of their own salvation. You are not helpless. you have a path forward. The answer is not to figure out what you did wrong, but to start doing what they did right. This is a point where historians and sociologists find a fascinating parallel with other religious movements around the world. The process is often the same: observation of a powerful group, identification of their rituals, and the subsequent adoption and adaptation of those rituals in the hope of achieving the same results. It's a fundamental human attempt to impose order on chaos and to find a formula for success. What's unique here is that the rituals being copied weren't ancient religious ceremonies, but the mundane, secular military procedures of the 20th century. A little-known fact is that in some communities, this period of self-doubt led to the destruction of their own pre-existing sacred objects. In a desperate attempt to prove their commitment to the new faith, some groups burned their old ceremonial masks and carvings, believing them to be obstacles to the return of John from. It was a total spiritual reset. So the question, what did we do wrong, slowly transforms into a new, more hopeful one: what must we do now? The answer is crystallizing in the collective consciousness of your people. You must not just want the cargo, you must earn it, and you earn it by meticulously, faithfully, and wholeheartedly recreating the world the Americans built. You must become the Americans. The path is clear. The work is about to begin. The period of questioning and despair begins to recede, replaced by a surge of determined, focused energy. The new consensus, the grand theory, has taken hold. The Americans were not gods, but prophets who showed you the path to the cargo. Your mistake was not in offending them, but in failing to understand that their actions were a demonstration, a blueprint for you to follow. The logic is simple, beautiful, and profoundly hopeful. If you do what they did, you will get what they got. This is the birth of what the outside world will call sympathetic magic on an industrial scale. It's the core principle of a voodoo doll. If you create a likeness of something, you can exert power over it. You will not just build a model of the Americans' world. You will build a working, life-sized replica, a giant voodoo doll of a military base designed to attract the real thing. The village becomes a think tank, a collaborative workshop of memory and interpretation. The elders who remember the events most clearly are now the high priests of this new endeavor. Every detail of the American presence is painstakingly recalled and debated. How exactly did they stack the crates? What time did they raise the flag? What were the exact words the man shouted when they were marching? Every memory is a sacred text. Every remembered detail a crucial piece of the liturgy. You find yourself in a long, earnest discussion about the nature of the soldiers' uniforms. Were the trousers tucked into the boots or worn over them? Did the helmets have a net on them? These are not stylistic questions. They are matters of immense theological importance. A mistake in the uniform could render the entire ritual ineffective. The logic of imitation extends to every facet of life. The Americans sat on raised platforms, chairs at raised flat surfaces, tables to eat. So, you begin to build crude chairs and tables from branches and vines. You abandon the practice of eating on the floor. The Americans drank from cylindrical containers, cups, and cans. So, you fashion cups from hollowed-out bamboo segments and use them for your water, mimicking the gesture of drinking a Coke. This logic is applied with a relentless, almost comical literalism. You remember seeing a soldier with a pen in his pocket. It becomes vital that your own ritual uniforms have a pocket with a stick in it. You saw them looking at their wrists, where they wore a small ticking machine. So you begin to carve watches from wood and strap them to your wrists, occasionally glancing at them with a serious expression, mimicking the act of checking the time. The core of the new doctrine is this: the cargo is not created by men in factories. It is summoned from the spirit world. The Americans' technology was not technology at all. It was religious paraphernalia. Their radios were not for communicating with other bases. They were for speaking to the ancestors. Their airfields were not landing strips, they were altars. Their paperwork was not bureaucracy, it was scripture. Historians are still fascinated by this particular point, the complete reinterpretation of secular objects as magical ones. It's a powerful lens on how a culture's core beliefs shape its perception of reality. To a society where the spiritual and material worlds are intrinsically linked, a bulldozer is no more or less magical than a sacred stone that guarantees a good harvest. They are both tools for interacting with powerful unseen forces. A particularly niche but illuminating detail is the interpretation of trash. You watch the Americans discard what seemed to be valuable items, empty cans, bottles. The new logic reframes this. This wasn't waste. It was an offering. Part of the ritual is to show the cargo gods that you have so much abundance you can afford to discard some of it. Therefore, your new ritual sites must include a sacred trash pile, a carefully curated collection of discarded items, left to show your faith in future abundance. It is ambitious. It is ambitious. You will not just perform one or two rules. You will recreate the entire system. You will build the airfield. You will build the airfield. You will build the planes to attract the real planes. You will march. You will raise the flag. You will become a mirror image of the force that so briefly and so profoundly changed your world. The doubt is gone, replaced by a powerful sense of purpose. You are no longer mourning a lost paradise. You are actively building a new one. This is not madness. It is the most logical thing in the world. You have seen the cause and the effect. Now, you will become the cause. The first and most important task is the grandest of them all, the construction of your own place belong plane. The Americans' old airstrip is already beginning to be reclaimed by the jungle, its red earth scars slowly healing over with green fuzz. But more importantly, that was their sacred ground. To truly prove your faith and master the ritual, you must build one for yourselves. The project begins with a sense of solemn, religious purpose, relatively flat expanse of land near your village. The men gather at dawn, not with the weary obligation of laborers, but with the focused intensity of acolytes. The tools are no longer the sharp steel machetes and shovels given by the Americans. Those are now precious relics too valuable to be used. Instead, you are back to using traditional tools, stone axes, wooden digging sticks, and woven baskets to carry away the earth, 100 times slower than when you were paid in cargo. You chop down towering trees with small, brittle stone heads that have to be constantly resharpened. You hack at the thick, tangled undergrowth with wooden clubs and knives. You dig into the hard-packed earth with sticks, your hands blistering undry. The physical toll is immense, but it is borne with a kind of spiritual fervor. This hard labor is a form of prayer, a demonstration of your commitment. Every drop of sweat is an offering to John from the process is a meticulous recreation of what you remember. You don't just clear a patch of land. You clear it with the same obsessive precision you witnessed in the Americans. The leaders of the project, men with the sharpest memories, direct the workforce. The edges must be straight. One will yell, holding up a long vine pole taut between two pegs to create a perfectly straight line, mimicking the surveyor's strings. You spend days leveling the ground, using nothing but your eyes and flat-edged planks of wood. You painstakingly scrape away high spots and fill in low ones. The baskets of earth are carried on your shoulders, a slow and light procession of workers moving back and forth, gradually transforming the landscape. The sheer scale of the undertaking is staggering. You are reshaping the earth with your bare hands, fueled by faith alone. There's a fascinating, almost philosophical debate among anthropologists about this act. Was it purely an attempt at magical summoning, or was it also a powerful act of community building? The shared struggle, the collective effort toward a single, transcendent goal, forged the disparate, confused villagers into a unified, disciplined society. The construction of the runway was as much about building a new social order as it was about calling down airplanes. You remember the Americans clearing the trees far from the edges of the runway. You dutifully replicate this, felling trees in a wide buffer zone around your new airstrip. You don't know about glide slopes or approach paths. You just know that this is how it was done, and therefore, it must be part of the ritual. The why is irrelevant. The what is everything. As the runway takes shape, it becomes the new center of your world. It is a place of immense power, a raw gash of red earth pointed expectantly at the sky. It is your altar, your direct line to the heavens. It feels sacred. Children are told not to play on it. It is to be kept clean, swept free of leaves and debris with palm frond brooms. A subtle but important detail is the material. The American airstrip was often reinforced with crushed coral or pierced steel planking to make it stable. You have none of that. Yours is just packed earth. This difference is either ignored or incorporated into the theology. Perhaps this initial runway is a starter model, a seed runway is a starter model, a seed runway that will eventually be transformed by John from into one with a hard, permanent surface. Finally, the day comes when it is declared finished. It's not as perfect as the American one, of course. It's a little uneven, the edge is not quite as sharp. But it is yours. You built it. You look at the long, straight path cutting through the familiar green of your island, and you feel a surge of pride and hope. You have followed the blueprint. You have constructed the sacred space. You have laid out the welcome mat. Now you just need to turn on the lights to guide the planes home. With the great runway complete, the next logical step is to build the structure that controlled it all. The tower. You remember seeing the Americans in a tall, spindly building next to their airfield. Men would climb up into a little room at the top and sit there for hours, often with those strange coconut shell-like objects on their ears, watching the sky and speaking into the black boxes. This clearly was the nerve center, the brain of the entire operation. It was from here that the summons were sent out and the sky birds were guided safely to the ground. You and a team of builders set about recreating this sacred spire. You have no steel girders or sheets of corrugated iron. Your materials are what the island provides. Bamboo, timber, and WWII, the same things you use to build your huts. But this will not be a hut. It will be a cathedral of the air, straightest bamboo stalks you can find for the main supports. They are driven deep into the ground at the edge of the runway, forming a square frame. The design is based entirely on the collective memory of the villagers. One man remembers it having 3 levels, another insists it was 2. After a long and serious debate, a consensus is reached. The structure is carefully lashed together with wet vine, which will shrink and tighten as it dries, creating surprisingly strong joints. The construction is a masterpiece of what is now called vernacular architecture, a structure built by local people using local materials and traditional techniques. But in this case, to imitate a completely foreign and technologically advanced form, it is a perfect physical manifestation of the cult's core belief system. As the tower rises, it becomes an object of fascination. It's taller than any dwelling in your village. It looks fragile, a skeleton of bamboo against the sky, but it is imbued with an immense symbolic power. This is your link between the earth and the heavens, a ladder for the spirit world. Finally, the main structure is complete, a spindly tower perhaps 30 feet high. Now, it must be outfitted with the necessary ritual equipment. This is where your ingenuity shines. You need to recreate the mysterious instruments of communication. The long, thin poles that stuck out from the American tower, the radio antennas, are replicated using slender lengths of bamboo. You don't know what an antenna does, but you know what it looks like. One man remembers seeing a spinning apparatus on a nearby hut, so a radar dish is constructed from a woven mat of palm fronds, mounted on a pivot so it can be turned to face different parts of the sky. The control room at the top is the most sacred space of all. A small platform is built, and a stool is placed inside. This is the throne of the Skywalker. A shelf is installed, and on it are placed the most important ritual objects, the radios. These are carved from blocks of wood. Knobs and dials are represented by smaller pieces of wood glued into place. Wires are made from lengths of twisted vine, running from the wooden radios out to the bamboo antennas. It is a perfect, non-functional replica. The role of the controller is one of great honor. A man is selected for his piousness and his keen eyesight. His job is to sit in the tower for hours every day, scanning the empty skies and listening. He is the guardian of the void, the patient fisherman waiting for a bite from the heavens. There's a small, poignant detail that some ethnographers recorded. The men chosen to be controllers would often refuse to speak to anyone while they were on duty. They were in a sacred state, communing with the spirit world, and could not be disturbed by mortal affairs. This wasn't just play acting, it was a deeply serious religious observance. The academic world still discusses the psychological state of these men. Were they truly expecting a voice to come from the wooden box? Or was the act of listening itself the ritual? The consensus leans towards the latter. The ritual's power lay in its faithful performance, not necessarily in an expectation of an immediate, literal result. It was an act of sustained faith. Now, your sacred site is nearly complete. You have the altar, the runway, and the pulpit, the control tower. The stage is set. You look at your handiwork, the long reed gash of the runway and the strange, skeletal tower standing sentinel beside it. It is a bizarre and beautiful monument to hope. It is a declaration written in blue that you are ready. You have built the house, now you just need to persuade the guest of honor to arrive. The runway is ready, the tower stands watch, but the great red earth altar feels incomplete, strangely naked. It's a stage without an actor, a nest without an egg. A new idea begins to form, an idea born from the logic of imitation and the ancient wisdom of the hunt. When you want to attract an animal, you use a decoy. You create a likeness of the creature you seek to draw it in. If you want to catch a bird, you might use a carved wooden bird to make it feel safe. The logic is flawless. To attract the metal birds, you must give them one of their own kind to call down to. You need bait. The decision is made. You will build an airplane. This is the most ambitious construction project yet. A control tower is one thing, but a life-sized replica of a C-47 transport plane is another entirely. The collective memory of the village is once again called upon. The men who worked closest to the American airfield become the lead designers. They draw shapes in the dirt with sticks, arguing passionately over the exact curve of the wingtip, the number of windows on the fuselage, the size of the tail fin. These are not engineering debates. They are theological disputes. To get the shape wrong would be to write the wrong prayer, to create a graven image that would anger, rather than attract the spirits of the cargo. You begin by building the skeleton. Strong, flexible timbers, the same kind you would use for the keel of a great outrigger canoe, are laid down to form the long body. The massive wings are framed with bamboo, lashed together with the same intricate knots your ancestors had used for centuries to build their homes and boats. The skills of the old world are being repurposed to summon the new one. The fuselage takes shape, a hollow, skeletal to bow wooden vine, looking like the ribcage of some enormous mythical beast. Once the frame is complete, it must be given a skin. You have no aluminum sheets, no metal rivets. You have palm fronds, grass, and rattan. Teams of women, the traditional masters of weaving, set to work creating huge, tightly woven mats. These are stretched over the wooden skeleton and stitched into place, forming the skin of the aircraft. The finished texture is organic, bristly, and yet, from a distance, it perfectly captures the form of a plane. It is a machine made of forest. The details are added with the loving care of a religious artist decorating an altar. The propellers are carved from thick planks of wood fixed to the front of the wing-mounted engines, which are themselves just big, round cages of woven vine. The wheels are the most difficult part. They are fashioned from solid, heavy cross-sections of a massive banyan tree trunk, rounded and smoothed as best you can. They don't turn, but they look the part. Inside the cockpit, a seat is installed for the pilot. The instrument panel is a flat piece of wood, onto which dials and gauges are painted with charcoal and berry juice. One of the most debated points among anthropologists is the builder's state of mind. Did they truly believe this creation was indistinguishable from a real airplane to a passing pilot? Or was its primary power symbolic, a physical manifestation of their collective will, a focus for their faith? The line is likely impossibly blurry. For you, the act of building it is the magic. The faith is in the craftsmanship. Finally, the most sacred task, the painting of the magical glyphs. Using white clay and it I made from crushed red rock. You meticulously copy the American insignia onto the wings and fuselage. The white star inside a blue circle represented by black charcoal. The letters USA painted on the tail. These markings are the plane's soul, its connection to the spiritual source of its power. Then comes an ingenious addition, a detail that shows just how closely you were watching. An elder remembers that sometimes the American planes would land in the dark. The runway would be lit up with lights, so you create landing lights. All along the edges of your earthen runway, you place hollowed-out coconut shells filled with flammable resin. At night, these can be lit, creating two parallel lines of fire, a welcoming, twinkling path leading from the heavens down to your waiting decoy. This is a lesser-known, but brilliant detail. The cult's practices the creation of these ritual runway lights. At last, it is done. With immense effort, the entire village helps to push the colossal, creaking structure of wooden straw out onto the middle of the runway. It sits there, silent and magnificent under the tropical sun. It is a perfect paradox, a symbol of advanced industrial technology constructed entirely from the raw materials of the jungle. It doesn't roar with the power of internal combustion, but it hums with the collective faith of your people. You have not just built a model. You look at its unblinking, painted on windows, and you wait for it to be seen by its brothers in the sky. The runway is built. The control tower stands tall. The great decoy plane waits patiently on the tarmac. The stage is set, but the actor's element is still missing: communication. You saw the American radio operators, the high priests in their humming tents, speaking to the spirits and summoning the cargo. Now, you must do the same. A new, elite role is created within the community, the radio man. This is a position of immense responsibility and prestige, reserved for those who are considered the most spiritually pure and disciplined. Their task is to sit in the bamboo control tower and listen for the voice of John from, and to send out your own messages of faith and readiness. Of course, your radios are the ones you've already made solid blocks of wood, intricately carved and painted to resemble the genuine articles. The true innovation, however, is the headset. You remember the Americans wearing strange contraptions over their ears, connected by a metal band. Your version is a masterpiece of found object art and practical ingenuity. You take the halves of a dried coconut shell, smooth them out, and attach them to a bent piece of flexible vine that can clamp gently over a man's head. A hollow bamboo tube meant to be the microphone is stuck into one of the coconut earpieces. The man chosen for the first watch ascends the rickety ladder to the control room. It is a solemn ceremony. He enters the small, sacred space, sits on the stool, and carefully places the coconut shell headset over his ears. He leans forward, his lips close to the bamboo microphone, and he waits. His job is to fold. First, he must listen. He sits in absolute silence for hours, straining to hear a voice through the wooden shell. He is not listening for static or radio waves, concepts you do not possess. He is listening for a spiritual whisper, a message from the cargo ancestry. His intense concentration is a form of meditation, a way of opening his mind to the divine. Second, he must transmit. Periodically, he will speak into the bamboo tube. The words are a mix of remembered English phrases, names of cargo items, and prayers to John from. He might say things like, "Hello, John from. Hello, America. Then I wait for you. Send more span. Send more coke. Over." The phrases are repeated like a mantra, a chant sent out into the ether. The scene inside the tower is one of profound, focused faith. Outside, the rest of the village treats the tower with reverence. Children are hushed as they pass it. No one is to disturb the radio man while he is on duty. He is the direct link, the sole point of contact with the source of all hope. What did these men actually hear? Anthropologists who interviewed former radio operators years later received a range of answers. Some admitted they heard nothing but the wind and the birds. For them, the act of listening, the ritual itself, was the important thing. It was a performance of faith. But others, their faces serious and their voices low, swore they heard messages. Whispers on the wind, faint words in the rustling of the leaves, instructions from John from himself. These messages would then be passed down to the village leaders and interpreted as new prophecies or instructions. This is a classic example of what psychologists call auditory P, or idle eye, the tendency to perceive meaningful sounds in random noise, like hearing words in the hum of a fan. For a person in a state of high expectation and deep belief, the brain is primed to find the patterns it's looking for. This isn't deception. It's a genuine perceptual experience shaped by faith. The academic debate continues. Were these men prophets having a real spiritual experience, or were they simply experiencing a predictable psychological phenomenon? From your perspective, the distinction is meaningless. The message is real, and frankly touching details is what happened when a radio would break. If a wooden knob fell off or the vine wire came loose, it wasn't simply repaired. A ceremony would be held. The radio man would have to diagnose the spiritual problem, and a ritual of cleansing or reconsecration would be performed before the physical repair could be made. The object was not just a model. It was a sacred vessel that had to be maintained in a state of spiritual purity. So the vigil continues. Day after day, a rotation of dedicated men sits in the bamboo tower, wearing their coconut headsets, speaking into bamboo tubes, listening to the silence. They are the living heart of the entire operation, the spiritual engine running on nothing but concentration and hope. They are waiting for the day when the silence on the other end of the line is finally broken. The ritual cannot be limited to the passive acts of building and listening. You remember the Americans' constant, restless activity, especially the synchronized rhythmic walking they performed in large groups. The marching. It served no discernible purpose. They weren't going anywhere, so it must have been a crucial religious ceremony, a display of discipline and unity to please the cargo spirits. This too must be replicated. A new ritual is born, the parade. The first step is to create the proper attire and equipment. The American soldiers all carried a stick, a long object of wooden metal that they held with great care. A rifle. You set about carving your own. You use long, straight branches of a local hardwood, patiently whittling them down to the correct shape. You carve the stock, the barrel, the trigger guard, all from a single piece of wood. The finished product is a crude but instantly recognizable effigy of a rifle. It has no moving parts, it cannot fire, but it has the correct form. And in sympathetic magic, form is function. Next, the uniform. You have no access to green cotton, real fabric, or sewing machines, but you remember the soldiers often marched with their chests bare in the hot sun. What was important were the markings. You saw the letters U, S, A, stenciled on their equipment and sometimes even tattooed on their skin. These three letters are clearly a powerful magical sigil, a declaration of allegiance to the cargo deity. So, you prepare for the parade by painting your bodies. Using clay and other natural pigments, you carefully draw the letters U, S, A, across your chests or on your backs. This is not decoration. It is the donning of a sacred vestment. You are marking yourself as a soldier of John from. Some men, remembering the different ranks, might add stripes on their arms with white clay, mimicking the chevrons of a sergeant or corporal. Every detail, no matter how small, is a vital part of the incantation. The parade itself takes place on the most sacred ground you have, the earthen runway. At a designated time, usually in the heat of the midday sun as the Americans often did, the men of the village assemble. You line up in straight rows, just as you saw them do. You hold your wooden rifles at your side, trying to emulate the stiff, formal posture of the soldiers. A leader, the self-appointed drill sergeant, stands before you. He has memorized the sounds, if not the meanings, of the American commands. He shouts, "Ed and shun," and you do your best to snap to a rigid posture. He yells, "Lep, HAI, Lep, HAI," Lep, a rhythmic chant that mimics the cadence of left, right, left, left, right, left. At his command, you begin to march. You lift your knees high, swing your arms in unison, and stomp your bare feet onto the packed red earth of the runway. The sound is a dull, rhythmic thud, a heartbeat for your new religion. You march up the runway and back down, turning in clumsy but earnest unison. You practice shouldering your wooden rifles, presenting them for inspection, and holding them at the ready. The sight would be surreal, a platoon of men with tribal paint on their faces and you, S.A., scrawled on their chests, marching with fake wooden guns under the tropical sun. It could be easily dismissed as a strange form of play, but for you, it is a deadly serious act of worship. Each shouted command is a hymn. You are demonstrating your discipline, your unity, and your readiness to receive John from. You are showing him that you are no longer just simple islanders. You are his army. There's a subtle academic point here. This militaristic display was not about aggression. Unlike many other anti-colonial movements that took up arms, your army was not intended to fight anyone. The rifle was not a weapon, it was a ritual wand. The marching was not a preparation for battle. It was a form of kinetic prayer. This is a crucial distinction that early colonial administrators often missed, viewing the drills as a potential military threat rather than a religious observance. A little-known variant of this ritual in some cults involved building mock cannons out of hollowed logs and staging inspections of them. The focus was always on the maintenance, discipline, and order associated with the military objects, not their function as weapons. As you march, the sun beating down on your painted back, your wooden rifle feeling heavy in your hands. You feel a sense of shared purpose you have never known before. You are part of something larger than yourself, a single body moving with a single will. You look at the decoy plane sitting silently on the runway, the bamboo control tower standing watch, and you feel a powerful surge of hope. You are doing the work. You are performing the rites. Surely, the gods must be watching. Surely, they must be pleased. Amidst the growing repertoire of your new rituals, the marching, the listening, the building, one symbol remains central, a beacon of hope and a promise of tangible blessings. It is the simple, powerful sign you first associated with the magic of healing, the Red Cross. The memory of the American medical tents is potent. These were places where the sick were made well, where pain was eased, and where a special category of cargo medicines, bandages, clean water was distributed. The Red Cross was the key that unlocked this bounty. Therefore, to summon that specific kind of cargo, you must prominently display its associated sigil. The flag-raising ceremony you witnessed every morning at the American base was clearly a vital ritual. They raised their star-spangled banner to greet the day and show fealty to their gods. You must do the same. But instead of the complex American flag, which is difficult to reproduce, your community chooses to elevate the symbol whose power you have witnessed most directly and which you need the most. You create your own flag. It is a simple affair, a rectangular piece of canvas, perhaps salvaged from the abandoned camp or woven from local fibers, is attached to a tall, smooth pole. On this white or off-white background, you paint a large, perfectly symmetrical cross using a pigment made from reed clay or berry juice. The pole is erected in the center of the village or, in some cases, next to the sacred runway, giving it a place of high honor. Every morning, just as the sun begins to warm the island, a ceremony is held. A designated flag-bearer, a position of great respect, approaches the pole. With slow, deliberate movements, they attach the Red Cross flag to a vine rope and raise it to the top. The villagers gather and stand in silence, watching the flag rise. Some may adopt the posture of the American salute, holding a hand to their forehead. It is a moment of quiet contemplation, a collective prayer for health and well-being. But the symbols used doesn't stop there. You begin to build a hospital. It's not a place of medicine as an outsider would understand it. It is a ritual space, a sacred hut set apart from the others, with a large red cross painted over its doorway. Inside, there are cots woven from bamboo meant for the sick to lie on. There might be a wooden table in the center, on which are placed other ritual objects, carved wooden syringes and empty glass bottles scavenged from the American camp, now filled with ordinary water, but treated as powerful potions. When someone in the village falls ill, they are brought to this hut. They are laid upon the cots, under the watchful eye of the Red Cross. A medic, a man or woman chosen for this role, might perform a ritual of healing. This could involve touching the sick person with the wooden syringe, or having them drink the potion from one of the sacred bottles. This practice is a fascinating and poignant example of faith healing, born from the observation of modern medicine. You don't understand germ theory or pharmacology, but you learn symbolism. The Red Cross hut is not meant to replace the old shamanistic cures entirely. Often, it exists alongside them, but it represents a new, powerful tool in the fight against the spirits of sickness. One of the more complex and debated aspects of this is how effective it was. From a medical standpoint, of course, the wooden syringes did nothing. However, from a psychological one, the effect could be profound. The placebo effect, the power of belief and community support in healing, is a well-documented phenomenon. For a believer, being cared for in a sacred space, surrounded by symbols of immense power, could genuinely reduce stress, boost morale, and perhaps even stimulate the body's own healing processes. This is a point where the spiritual and the scientific find a sliver of common ground. A lesser-known fact is that some cults extended the Red Cross symbolism to animals. If a prized pig fell sick, it might be quartered in a special pen adorned with a small red cross, in the hope that John Frum's healing power extended to livestock as well, protecting the community's traditional sources of wealth. The Red Cross flag fluttering against the blue Pacific sky becomes a powerful symbol of your movement. It is a clear and unambiguous signal to the outside world and to the heavens. It says, "We are the faithful. We have learned the rituals of healing and care. We are ready to receive the medical cargo." It is a symbol of hope, a plea for health, and a central icon in the complex, evolving tapestry of your new faith. It stands as a testament to your ability to take a foreign symbol and imbue it with your own profound meaning and desperate hope. The days bleed into one another, each marked by the same unwavering routine. The dawn ceremony of raising the Red Cross flag, the rhythmic thudding march of the wooden rifle platoons on the earthen runway, the long silent vigil of the radio man in his bamboo tower, his coconut shell headset pressed to his ears, the meticulous sweeping of the decoy plane, keeping it free of leaves and debris. The sun rises and sets. The tides ebb and flow, but the sky remains devastatingly, stubbornly empty. You are living in a state of suspended animation, a collective holding of the breath. Your entire society has been regenerated for a single purpose, waiting. It's a grand, open-ended performance for an audience that may or may not exist. The initial feverish burst of activity has settled into a long, patient, and sometimes wearying rhythm of observance. The yams are still planted, but with less enthusiasm. The fish are still caught, but the work feels like a temporary measure, a way to pass the time until the real provisions arrive. The core of your community's energy, its emotional and spiritual focus, is wholly invested in the rituals of summoning. Life has become a rehearsal for an event that is endlessly postponed. Fruitless wait begins to take a psychological toll. Doubts, once banished by the flurry of building and marching, begin to creep back in at the edges of your mind in the quiet of the night. Did we build the runway straight enough? Is the decoy plane the right shape? Is the radio man chanting the correct words? Tiny schisms begin to appear in the movement. One prophet might declare that the fault lies in the marching style and introduces a new, more authentic step. Another might insist that the wooden rifles must be painted black, not left as plain wood. These small disagreements are debated with the deadly seriousness of theological doctrine. This state of perpetual, unfulfilled anticipation has been compared by scholars to Samuel Beckett's famous play, Waiting for Godot. In the play, two characters wait endlessly for the arrival of a mysterious figure named Godot, who never comes. They pass the time with absurd conversations on pointless activities to distract themselves from the despair of their situation. Your life has become a real-world version of this. The rituals, the marching, the listening, they are all ways to fill the emptiness, to give structure and meaning to the act of waiting. A little-known but fascinating aspect of this period was the development of cargo maps. These were not geographical maps, but spiritual ones, drawn in the sand or on pieces of bark. They showed the island of Tana, the volcano Yosur, and the land of America, often depicted as being inside the volcano. Lines and arrows would show the path the cargo would take, flowing from America through the volcano to the runway where you waited. These maps were not for navigation. They were tools for visualization, for strengthening faith by giving it a tangible, pictorial form. The colonial authorities, who had initially dismissed your activities as a bizarre but harmless native craze, begin to grow more concerned. They see the refusal to work on plantations, the rejection of missionary schools, and the unified, disciplined nature of your movement as a form of passive resistance, a quiet rebellion. They try to intervene. They send officials to lecture you on the real source of the cargo factories, ships, a global economic system. You listen politely to their explanations, but the words are meaningless. Factories. You have seen with your own eyes that the cargo comes from the sky and the sea. You have seen them sink jeets into the ocean. Their explanation of economics is a far more unbelievable and far-fetched story than your own belief in John Frum. You have a coherent system based on direct observation. They have only abstract words. Their attempts to educate you only strengthen your conviction that they are trying to trick you, to keep the secret of the cargo for themselves. And so, the waiting continues. Years begin to pass. Children who were born after the Americans left are now old enough to march in the parades, holding tiny wooden rifles carved by their fathers. The story of the Americans and the promise of John Frum is transformed from a lived memory into a foundational myth, a story told to the next generation. The faith does not die. In the face of all evidence to the contrary, it adapts and endures. The waiting is no longer just a phase. It has become a way of life. You are not alone in your waiting. You have an audience, though you may not always see them. They are the colonial administrators, the missionaries, the traders who still operate on the fringes of your world. They watch your marching, your flag raising, your silent vigils in the bamboo tower. And they talk. They write letters and reports. And in those reports, they give your new way of life a name. They call it a cargo cult. It's a simple, dismissive label. You are participants in a bizarre and primitive misunderstanding. They see your wooden rifles and your decoy airplane not as acts of profound faith, but as evidence of a childlike mind failing to grasp the complexities of technology and economics. They look at you with a mixture of pity, frustration, and a certain smug superiority. If only they would listen to us, a district administrator might sigh, writing in his journal, we could explain how things are really made. But they prefer their fantasies. This view that you are a cult driven by irrational beliefs becomes the dominant narrative for decades. You are seen as a textbook case of magical thinking, a curiosity for the outside world to marvel at. You are the people who worship airplanes. But then, as time goes on, a different kind of outsider begins to look at your world, not with pity, but with a sharp analytical curiosity. These are the anthropologists, the sociologists, the historians. They spend time in your villages, they learn your language, and they start to ask a different question. They ask, what if this isn't irrational at all? What if, within their own worldview, this is the most logical thing they could possibly do? And from this question, a new theory emerges, a powerful counter-narrative that continues to be debated in universities to this day. This theory proposes that your movement is not just a religion. It is a sophisticated act of resistance. These scholars argue that the John Frum movement was, at its heart, a political awakening. Before the Americans, your island was a collection of disparate, sometimes rival, clans. The belief in John Frum united you for the first time against a common adversary, The colonial system that had long suppressed your culture and exploited your labor. The marching wasn't just about mimicking soldiers, it was about building a disciplined, unified social body. Your wooden rifle army was a symbol of a new, unified Tana nation. The colonial economy depended on you working their plantations for very low wages, paid in a currency you were forced to use. By refusing to work and declaring that all true wealth comes from John from, you were essentially going on strike. You were deliberately undermining the economic foundations of colonial rule. A little-known detail is that some of the most radical John from prophets explicitly forbade their followers from using the colonial currency, calling it dirty money and insisting that all trade be done through traditional barter until the cargo returned. This was a direct, calculated blow to the administration. Most importantly, they see it as a form of cultural resistance. You weren't just passively waiting for handouts. You were actively reshaping modernity to fit your own spiritual framework. You took the most powerful symbols of the West airplanes, radios, military discipline, and you stripped them of their original meaning. You subordinated them to your God, John from, and integrated them into your Keston. It was a way of saying, we will accept your powerful things, but we will do it on our own terms. We will not accept the cultural and spiritual baggage that comes with them. You were taking control of the encounter, domesticating the foreign, and in doing so, preserving the core of your own identity. So, which is it? Are you a deluded cultist mistaking a generator for a god? Or are you a clever revolutionary, using religion as a tool for political liberation? The truth, as always, is probably somewhere messily in between. The academic world still argues about it, with some scholars emphasizing the religious and millenarian aspects, while others focus on the political and anti-colonial dimensions. But for you, standing on the red earth of your runway, holding your wooden rifle, these labels are meaningless. You are not thinking about proto-nationalism or syncretic religious movements. You are thinking about the gleam of a tin can. You are remembering the sweet taste of Coca-Cola. You are remembering a time when life was easy and the future was bright. You are doing what makes sense. You are following the path you were shown. The outside world can call it whatever they want. For you, it is simply the way. It is the new truth. It is the work that must be done. One day, a new kind of visitor arrives. He doesn't come on a giant gray ship or in a roaring metal bird. He comes in a small, sputtering motorboat, or perhaps he is led on foot through the jungle by a guide from the coast. He is not a soldier, not a missionary, not a government official. He carries no gun and no Bible. Instead, he carries a notebook, a camera, and an inexhaustible supply of questions. He is an anthropologist. He is an anthropologist. He is quiet and patient. He watches everything, but with a different kind of gaze than the colonial administrators. It's not a look of judgment or pity. It's one of intense, focused curiosity. He spends his days just sitting observing. He watches you raise the Red Cross flag. He watches the men march with their wooden rifles. He meticulously sketches your decoy airplane and your bamboo control tower in his notebook. Then, slowly he begins to talk to you, often through an interpreter at first, but gradually learning a few words of your language. He doesn't tell you that your beliefs are wrong. He doesn't try to explain how a radio really works. He asks you to explain it to him. Tell me more about John from, he might say. When did you first see him? What did he promise? Why must the marching be done in this way? What do you hear in the coconut headset? This is a new experience. For the first time, someone from the outside world is treating your beliefs not as a silly mistake, but as a serious and complex system of thought worthy of study. He is trying to understand the world from your point of view. You find yourself explaining the logic. You recount the story of the Americans' arrival, the endless flow of cargo, their strange rituals, and their baffling departure. You explain the irrefutable evidence of the $1 million point, where they planted the cargo in the sea. You explain the logic of imitation, the importance of the Red Cross, the power of the letters U, S, A. To your surprise, he doesn't laugh. He listens intently, nodding and taking furious notes. Your faith, for the first time, is being treated as data. He photographs everything. He takes pictures of your wooden rifles, your woven airplane, the men marching in their body paint. He might ask to take your portrait. You pose stiffly, holding your ritual tools, unsure of what this little black box in his hands is doing, but understanding that it is his special kind of tool for capturing the world. This process of being studied is a strange and complex one. On one hand, it's validating. The fact that this stranger is so interested in your ways seems to confirm their importance. On the other hand, it's objectifying. You're becoming a case study, a chapter in a book, an example of a millenarian movement in a post-Colpian context. You're deeply held. Sacred beliefs are being translated into the dry, academic language of a foreign tribe. This encounter between the cargo cults and anthropology is a famous, and sometimes fraught, chapter in the history of the discipline. Early on, some researchers were not as respectful, and their presence could be disruptive. But many, like the great Peter Lawrence in New Guinea or Jean G. Urt Ontana, produced seminal works that tried to explain the internal logic and rationality of the movements to a skeptical Western world. The debate they started about whether it's ever truly possible to understand a culture so different from one's own continues to this day. A little-known side effect of this research was that the act of being documented sometimes changed the cult itself. When an anthropologist asked a leader to codify the rules of the John from movement for his notebook, it forced the leader to formalize beliefs that might have previously been more fluid. The very act of observation could sometimes crystallize the beliefs into a more rigid doctrine. Eventually, the anthropologist leaves. He packs up his notebooks, his camera, and his tent. He thanks you for your time and your stories. Months or even years later, you might see him again. He might bring you a strange gift, a book. Inside are the photographs he took. You see your own face, the faces of your friends and family, staring back at you from the glossy page. You see your airplane, your tower, your marching soldiers, all frozen in time. You can read the words written around the pictures, but you understand that your story, your faith, has now become a piece of cargo itself. It has been taken away, processed in a faraway land, and brought back to you in a new, strange, and permanent form. Your waiting has been recorded. It is now, officially, history. Decades pass. The world outside your island changes in ways you cannot imagine. Men walk on the moon. The Cold War rises and falls. A vast, invisible web called the Internet begins to connect the globe. But Ontana, in the shadow of the grumbling volcano, the waiting continues. It has become the new KAS Dom, a tradition as deeply ingrained as the yam planting rituals of your ancestors. You are older now. Your hair is gray, your skin more wrinkled than the bark of the banyan tree. The memories of the Americans are no longer sharp, personal experiences. They have softened into legend, into the sacred stories you tell your grandchildren. You are now an elder, a keeper of the faith. The rituals have evolved, but they persist. The marching is no longer a daily activity, but it is performed with great ceremony on one special day of the year. That day is February 15th. This is John from Day. The exact origin of this date is, like so much else, shrouded in mystery. Some say it was the day a prophet first received a message from John. Others suggest it might have been the birthday of a forgotten American soldier, or perhaps a date mentioned on a calendar seen in an officer's tent. The historical sourcing is uncertain, and scholars still debate its roots, but its significance is now absolute. The village is alive with a festive, sacred energy. The red earth of the runway is swept clean. The old, weathered decoy airplane might be patched up with fresh palm fronds. The men prepare their uniforms. Yes, hey, are freshly painted onto chests and backs. The wooden rifles, polished smooth by years of handling, are brought out from the huts where they are kept as sacred objects. The parade is a grand affair. The John from Army, now consisting of 3 generations of believers, lines up. There are old men like you, who remember the stories from their fathers. There are men in their prime, the backbone of the movement. And there are young boys, their faces a mixture of excitement and solemnity, holding small, crudely carved rifles, taking their first steps in the long march of faith. They march with a practiced rhythmic stomp. The chants echo across the clearing. The Red Cross flag is raised, fluttering alongside perhaps a real American flag, obtained from a visiting tourist or journalist over the years. This flag is not a symbol of American geopolitical power. It is a holy relic, a direct connection to the spiritual realm of Janfram. The ceremony is a powerful spectacle of cultural endurance. It's a living museum or reenactment of a historical encounter that has been transformed into a timeless religious pageant. It shows the world, and more importantly, it shows Janfram that you have not forgotten. You are still his loyal soldiers. You are still his loyal soldiers. You are still his loyal soldiers. In the early days, the return of the cargo was expected to be imminent. Every day could be the day. Now, for many, the belief is more patient, more eschatological. Janfram will return, yes, but he will return in his own time, when the world is ready. The rituals are now less about immediate summoning and more about maintaining a state of readiness, of keeping the covenant alive for the generations to come. What's fascinating and not widely known is how the movement has adapted to the modern world. Instead of trying to isolate themselves completely, they have learned to engage with it on their own terms. The annual Janfram Day Parade has become a tourist attraction. Outsiders, anthropologists, journalists, and curious travelers come to watch the spectacle. They bring cameras and they bring cash. In a strange, ironic twist, the performance of waiting for cargo has started to generate a new kind of cargo. Your faith has become a marketable cultural product. You sit and watch the young men march, their bodies painted, their faces stern with concentration. The sight fills you with a complex mix of pride and melancholy. The faith has survived. The story is safe, but the cargo, the real, miraculous, world-changing cargo has still not returned. The sky is still empty, but you look at the faces of the young boys, and you see the belief shining in their eyes. The waiting will continue. The story is not over yet. A sound slices through the humid air, sharpened and natural. It's not the drone of an airplane or the rumble of the volcano. Mechanical click-clack. You see the source, a brightly dressed woman with pale skin and hair the color of sunshine is pointing a small black box at the marching men. She is one of the new strangers. They are the new cargo source. They arrive on cruise ships that dwarf the old American landing craft or in sleek, modern airplanes that land on a paved, permanent runway on the other side of the island. They are not a unified army in green, but a chaotic, colorful tribe of individuals. They carry their own kind of cargo, cameras that capture moments without a soul, plastic bottles filled with clean water, and brightly colored pieces of paper money that they trade for woven baskets and a chance to witness your ceremonies. You sit on a log in the shade watching them. You see a young tourist hand a banknote to one of the village boys in exchange for a photograph with him. The boy, his chest painted with the sacred letters U.S.A., takes the money with a serious expression. In your day, the cargo was a gift, a blessing that flowed from an infinite, mysterious source. Now, it is transcational. It is earned through the performance of your faith. The ritual has become the product. The movement has had to adapt to survive. It is no longer just a village belief. It is now a political party. The Janfram movement is a registered entity in the national government of Vanuatu. Your leaders, the sons and grandsons of the first prophets, travel to the capital city of Port Vila. They sit in parliament. They negotiate for schools and roads. They have learned to fight for cargo not just with ritual, but with rhetoric and votes. It's a strange and pragmatic evolution. They are still trying to bring the abundance of the modern world to their people, but they are now using the modern world's own tools to do it. This is a detail few outsiders know, that your spiritual movement has a formal seat at the table of power. But as you watch the young men march, you wonder. Their steps are perfect, their chants are loud. But is their faith the same? Do they feel the same desperate or consuming hope that you did, staring at an empty sky? Or is this now a performance, a reenactment for the benefit of the clicking cameras and the rustling banknotes? The line between belief and apologists is still visit love to debate. Can a ritual be both a sacred act and a tourist show at the same time? Perhaps it can. Perhaps that is the only way for the old dream to survive in this new world. A young boy runs past you, clutching a reddened white can. Coca-Cola. It looks just like the ones you remember, a sacred icon from the golden age. But the boy doesn't treat it with reverence. He drinks it quickly and tosses the empty can aside, a piece of modern, disposable trash. The ultimate cargo has become commonplace. The dream of John from is not dead. It has just become more complicated. It has learned to live into worlds at once, the world of ancestral belief and the world of global tourism. The great shining ships of cargo may never return to the shore, but smaller pieces of it now wash up daily, brought by the tide of curious visitors. The waiting continues, but now at least you get paid for your time. The sky is still quiet, but the village is not. It hums with a new kind of energy, a complex mix of ancient faith and modern commerce. The story fades now like the glow of the volcano giving way to the morning sun. The sharp edges of the tale, the roar of the plains, the clang of metal, the rhythmic stomp of marching feet begin to soften, blurring into the warm and quiet air of the deep Pacific night. The island of Tanna recedes, becoming a dark, sleeping shape on a vast ocean of dreams. Let the memory of the red earth and the bamboo towers dissolve. Let the sound of the waves on the shore become the sound of your own slow, steady breathing. The questions of cargo and cults, of faith and history, can rift away now like smoke from a dying fire. They are just stories, and stories are for lulling the world to sleep. You can feel the weight of your own body, a comfortable heaviness sinking into your bed. The air around you is still and safe. The low, distant grumble of the volcano has become the gentle hum of the fan in your room, a soft, constant presence guarding your rest. There is no need to wait for anything anymore. No need to watch the sky. There is only the quiet, peaceful darkness and the gentle, downward pull of slumber. Let the current take you, drifting now, sinking softly into the deep, deep quiet of the night. The end of the article. Good night.